Those who understand politics will tell you straight away that it is impossible for somebody who has never been in politics before to get elected President of the Republic of Kenya. Although personally, if you ask me, I wouldn't use the word impossible in politics. Because the truth is, in politics, anything is possible. But granted, the way politics works, the chances of an outsider are very slim. In fact, the Americans have an expression for this kind of candidate. They call them a dark horse candidate. And in Kenya currently, a very interesting trend is emerging. We are seeing some very strong dark horse candidates emerging. And two names at the moment stand out. That of billionaire businessman Jimmi Wanjigi and that of the current CS internal, Fred Matiangi. Now, the super fascinating thing here is that these are not just nobodies walking off the streets to run for the presidency. No, these are very prominent, well-known Kenyans. And they're coming into the game, and this is very important, and they're coming into the game of politics at just the right time for dark horse candidates. Because Kenyans are fed up of politicians. Now, once upon a time, precisely the same thing happened in a more mature democracy. But it happened in the United States of America. In 1976, when a little-known peanut farmer called Jimmy Carter presented himself for the presidency, the initial reaction from most political analysts was just to laugh him off. Yes, he had been governor of Georgia, the state of Georgia. But beyond state lines, nobody knew who Jimmy Carter was. Nobody had ever heard of him. But his timing was perfect. Americans were fed up with Washington and politicians. This, of course, was shortly after the Watergate scandal, which had forced the resignation of President Richard Nixon. And in the Democratic Party nominations primaries, Carter was up against very experienced politicians. But the final result illustrated just how fed up the American voter was of politicians. Because the dark horse candidate known as Jimmy Carter had a very emphatic victory of 39.2% of the vote. In a very crowded field. That was very impressive. And so let us start by striking off the word impossible from the analysis of the 2022 presidential elections. Now I can see you're not totally convinced that the 2022 presidential elections in Kenya may turn out to be the election of the dark horse. So let me tell you something else that I'm sure many have noticed. The two major presidential candidates in the minds of Kenyans have started very early reducing each other's votes all over the country. Deputy President William Samoei Ruto has made impressive inroads in Nyanza, both Luo Nyanza and non-Luo Nyanza. And there's no doubt that whatever happens, he will reduce Raila Odinga votes in Western Province amongst the Mulembe Nation. And in my view, in Central Province, none of the two will win the House of Mubi votes. Another candidate is bound to get more votes than these two. At the coast, I believe Raila will have a strong showing, but I still believe that Ruto will take away some of his votes, reduce them dramatically. I'm sure you get the gist of what I'm saying. And so, bottom line, the situation we have had in previous elections, where the two major candidates win major votes in major regions of the country, I don't think it's going to happen this time. Indeed, it is looking very likely that for the first time in the history of our country, the 50% plus one rule will kick in and force a second round. Now. Does that favor a dark horse candidate or not? Of course it favors them greatly. Because all they have to do is to make sure that they're second in the first round, then the top two, which is much easier than winning an election in the first round. In other words, it seems that the 2022 presidential elections will actually be presidential primaries to start with a very crowded field, mchujo, that will end up with only two candidates. And the chances of one of those two candidates being an outsider, a dark horse, somebody who nobody gave a chance, are extremely high. And there's yet another factor that will greatly favor an outsider, a dark horse. And that is the Kikuyu Kalenjin factor. By the time Kenyans go to the polls in 2022, we will almost be 59 years old, almost 60, as an independent country. And in all those years, only two communities have held the office of the President of the Republic. Kenya has 40 other communities who have never had their son or their daughter being a resident of State House. Now that is going to be a very strong factor in the upcoming elections. So much so that I really strongly believe that it will rule out the chances of one of the two major presidential candidates who hails from the Kalenjin community. Coupled with the fact that people are fed up with politicians, it is very likely that all these 40 communities will gang up against the two privileged communities who have dominated State House, dominated the presidency. Bottom line, there will be a very unique window of opportunity for dark horse candidates who do not belong to either of these two communities. That means the candidature of Fred Matiangi should not just be brushed off. And especially because of the backing, political backing, that has made Fred Matiangi decide to vie for the presidency. Because you can be sure he did not wake up one morning and make the decision on his own. He is being pushed forward by some people who have made very careful, informed calculations, political calculations. Although these calculations could go terribly wrong, if some other outsider from amongst us, who is attractive enough, presents themselves for the presidency. And so when you see people laughing at dark horse candidates presenting themselves for the presidency, don't be surprised, don't be alarmed, because it has happened before. People laughed a lot when Jimmy Carter presented himself. You know, last year I did a video where I focused on the mood of the Kenyan voter. The Kenyan voter at the moment is suffering. They've gone through an experience like no other. And they're very angry. And one has to be very careful with somebody who's angry. They can do anything. Out of spite, they can decide to do something to you that you will never forget. That is human nature. How many times in parliamentary elections have we seen people being elected, very unexpectedly by very angry voters? The example that stands out most for me was in Nyeri, where the voters opted to vote for a kid, literally. They decided to teach the political heavyweights in the region a lesson they would never forget. I have a feeling that we're about to see precisely the same thing happening in our presidential elections. And that should be very interesting. Now, before I go, a quick reminder. Please don't forget WIB number 67, which deals with the deep state, especially what they've done in the past and what they're planning to do now. You can see the email address in front of your screens right now. Use it, send a blank email to that email address. You'll receive an automated email response immediately, giving you payment instructions in case you're not yet a WIB subscriber. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.